Before moving to the more moderate wing of the Democratic candidates, they acknowledged that Senators Booker, Harris, and Bennett got no response from the electorate, and Governors Bullock, Inslee, and Patrick also faded away without making any impact. They then discuss the candidates remaining, and they leave out Tom Steyer. Of Pete Buttigieg, they say he has an all-star resume. They look forward to him working his way up. That's fair. He is not qualified to be President of the United States. He can make major contributions to any Democratic administration, and I hope he is included by whoever wins. Of Yang, they say he is engaging, enthusiastic, and thought-provoking. They want him to get involved in New York politics. God forbid that that would happen. When I heard Yang speak in Ames, Iowa, about a week ago, someone asked him what he's going to do if he doesn't win, and he said he expects to be appointed to a major post in any Democratic administration and to contribute in that fashion. Let's keep his clarity of thought, his good ideas, focused on a bigger picture, focused on the national stage. Of Mayor Bloomberg, they were somewhat huffy. The Times acknowledged endorsing him twice in his campaigns for mayor of New York City. However, they're very critical about Bloomberg for his refusal to campaign. He has not been seen in Iowa that I'm aware. He's not on the ballot. No one's going to be caucusing for him. He hasn't asked anybody to caucus for him. And if there are Bloomberg television ads running in Iowa, I haven't seen them. Mayor Bloomberg refused to meet with the New York Times editorial board. This offended them. Tom Steyer, on the other hand, is a billionaire. He doesn't have nearly as much money as Bloomberg, but he has more money than Trump, more than likely. He has been out campaigning. He holds political events in Iowa and Nevada and South Carolina and New Hampshire. The last poll I saw, and I don't study them, they just catch my eye, had Steyer at 4% in Iowa and Andrew Yang at 3% in Iowa. That's not going to result in any delegates when you have a 15% viability test, but he's been out here talking to people, answering questions. I saw him speak in Mason City. I went to a house party here in West Des Moines. He has spent significant money on TV ads. He has the money to spend. But he has also spent significant money in the past elections on Democratic candidates across the nation. So he is putting his money where his mouth is, and he's putting his feet on the ground in Iowa. He was one of the 6 participants in the national Democratic debate. He did appear for an interview with the New York Times. That interview is printed in the paper, and in between their interruptions and whatnot, when he says something, they put their version of events in. All that's fine. I'm not criticizing that. What I am criticizing is the failure to give even one sentence of recognition to Tom Steyer's past good works and his campaign for president in the 2020 primaries. I see no excuse for that omission, and I think it reflects a bad kind of arrogance that the New York Times is guilty of. It's useful to step outside the box for a minute and imagine the New York Times interviewing Donald Trump in their editorial interview. I'm certain he wouldn't go. In fact, he would probably flip them the finger and tweet something rude. He defines Trump as an unconventional candidate. And he notes that Trump had no difficulty dispensing with 16 conventional Republican candidates in 2016. He also was able to defeat an ultra-conventional candidate in Hillary Clinton, who Steyer described as the most qualified candidate ever to run for president. Steyer bases his appeal to voters by saying, "I am an unconventional Democrat. I'm out of the mold. I'm different." The New York Times responds to this out-of-the-box perspective by failing to acknowledge it, more or less as they failed to acknowledge Donald Trump during the 2016 presidential election. Before I make my observations, it is worth recalling that my New Year's View video says that I think Joe Biden will be the presidential nominee and Amy Klobuchar will be the vice presidential nominee. It's been 3 weeks since I made that video. Nothing has changed my view. Am I a Biden supporter? I'm not really a supporter of anyone. I'm an observer and I'm giving you my observations. The treatment by the Times of Joe Biden is fair overall. Given that they don't endorse him, they're remarkably complimentary of him as a person and his accomplishments. They say that he has devoted much time and experience to public service. He has the greatest fluency in foreign policy. And they acknowledge that he's a figure of great warmth and empathy, which he is. And this comes across very clearly to any voters who appear at one of his events. In addition to that, he's extremely good at making eye contact. I saw Bill Clinton in New Hampshire in 1996, and Bill Clinton made eye contact with every voter in the room, just like Joe Biden does. Now, for the cons on Joe Biden. His campaign tinkers at the edge of healthcare and climate change. Okay, it's not as sweeping as Bernie's proposals or Elizabeth Warren's proposals, but harken back to what the New York Times said, that any of these Democratic candidates is more progressive than any Democrat elected as president in decades and decades. He emphasizes returning the country to where things were before Trump took office. This is not really true. It was true in his Fort Dodge speech, but he has moved left or in a progressive direction since then. I have heard him acknowledge explicitly that the country has changed since then. There are new problems, new solutions are required. I just saw him last weekend, and he didn't make any statement on the spectrum of status quo versus progressive change, but his substantive answers to the questions asked indicated progressive change was needed. And again, even the New York Times acknowledges that when it says all of the candidates are more progressive than any president in decades. So why do they dismiss him? He's 77. It's time to pass the torch. That's wrong. I'm a fan of Amy Klobuchar. I've said nice things about her in all of my commentaries of her videos. And my most recent video said the day may come when Amy emerges as a frontrunner. I continue to think that a Biden-Klobuchar ticket, with perhaps Joe Biden saying he would only run for one term, is an excellent approach. She is the standard bearer for the Democratic center. Her vision goes beyond incremental. I believe that's true, it does. She has a vision of where she wants to go. She has the best chance for Congress to pass a progressive agenda. Well, that's true too, but it could be that she has a 14% chance and the other candidates don't rise above a 10% chance. She's the most effective senator. I think statistically that's accurate. When you have a dysfunctional Senate, that's damning with faint praise. She's a deal maker and a unifier. In detailing her plans, the Times labels them as surprisingly progressive. My only quibble with that is that the same description could be applied to Joe Biden's plans. He is not a status quo candidate, as the Times has attempted to paint him. That is not what he's telling the voters of Iowa. Returning to Amy, on foreign policy, the Times says she will lead by example, not by threats by tweet. Well, that comment applies to every Democratic candidate. None of them are going to threaten other countries by tweet. That will never happen again in American politics. The negatives on Amy, according to the Times, how she treats her staff. I heard that rumor when I first heard about Amy, and the particular rumor was that she threw a stapler at a staff member. Now, I don't think this is Whitey Ford winding up and throwing a fastball stapler at somebody. This is This is frustration tossing a stapler across the room. Okay, that's widely known in Iowa. It's been widely known since October, November. The Times notes that Bill Clinton and even Joe Biden would lose their temper with their staff, whatever. Obviously, it's behavior that she's not proud of, that no one would be proud of, but it certainly doesn't DQ one from elective office. She's not polling well. Well, that's true, she's not. I think the last poll I saw was 11. The one before that was 8. And remember, the viability threshold for the Democratic caucuses is 15%. But she's popular in Minnesota. She certainly is. Every time she's run, she's carried every congressional district in Minnesota. That includes Michelle Bachmann's. At the end, the New York Times says, Democrats would be smart to recognize that Trump's vision for America's future is shared by many millions of Americans. Well, that's true. There is a Republican base who will vote for Trump no matter how outrageous his actions. What's more important is that many middle-of-the-road Americans voted for Trump out of frustration with how things are. This was something the New York Times did not recognize in 2016. And giving lip service to that concept in editorials such as this does not mean the New York Times is doing a good job covering this election. I hope this was helpful. If you enjoyed the video, please give it a thumbs up. If you like this political content, please consider subscribing. Thank you for watching.